All right, welcome everyone to another weekly edition of Stock Market Mutterings. This is for the week beginning on the 29th, only a couple of days, and we're already going to be in May. So if you guys are struggling with your trading, needing a little help in this market, make sure you click on this link I will post on the screen that takes you directly to our trade room. As always, I will do my best in this week's version to give you some direction about this market, a few setups that I have in mind, and hopefully that will translate to you making a few bucks. Now, one thing I do want to say before we get started is I've been talking about this a while. I've now have a private room on StockTwits, and this is just an opportunity here where I can share only my trade ideas and only my actual trades in a real-time environment. So for some of you out there that can't commit to being in front of a visual full-time trade room where I'm sharing my charts, showing my account statements, showing all that good stuff in real time in my trades, and you just don't have the time to be committed to sitting next to the computer, or it bugs you, or you just don't need to see all of that, you can now take advantage of the service by getting just my trade ideas, a full-on market report every morning, as well as my actual trades in real time. Check it out. It's less than half of the cost. It's a great way for many of you to get started. So I'll post the link up there. So let's go ahead and talk about the market here. Excuse the chicken scratch, because I did a class the other day on trend lines and stuff, and I've been just drawing a mess on there. But if you go back to 2 weeks ago, which was the last market mutterings that I did, I said it was in the mail, that I really thought we had come way too far since Christmas Eve to start turning around at all-time highs. And you can see Friday just closing up. So it's just a melt-up market. And just to be straightforward, we can debate about fundamental analysis and technical analysis and all this good stuff. But what it really comes down to is what your eye is telling you. What is it that you're seeing? And to just be straightforward, the very best trade that you have right now is any stock, just about any stock that pulls back into a support area, fades into the gap, holds into a support. It's a freaking long. You're just buying into these dips. I know the BTFD thing is sort of a joke, but it's not right now. I mean, with a market that's this strong with virtually no drawdown to it whatsoever, that is just the trade right now until it stops working. Now, we did see a few things throughout the course of this week that's kind of starting to sprinkle on a little bit of doubt, starting to shake people out of the positions a bit. And I can't remember the exact days, but I think you had a pretty good flush here on Thursday, and I think was maybe Wednesday. Now, one of the good things that you are getting is prior to the last couple of weeks, the market just melted. You virtually got no pullback. But the last 2 weeks, there have been some push downs. Like you had a pretty good sell spot here on the SPY, and it actually gave a double rotation into the first hour of selling before it ultimately bounced. And Friday, you had some selling right there as well. Excuse me. So you've had some threatening push downs, and I think you got there a couple of 100 points in the negative on one of those days. Excuse me for not remembering what day it was, but you had a pretty good sell down day there, and it was a little hesitant to bounce. What does that mean? It just means there's a little bit of money getting pulled out here, but still the overall theme remains that it's going to go through all-time highs. Now, perhaps when you really get through all-time highs, or maybe after some of this earnings season gets out of the way, that we might start to see a rotation down lower, or maybe after the trade deal or something like that. But for right now, until you see a significant change, it's going to stay the same. Now, when I say significant, what I'm looking at is, how about two solid back-to-back reds? If you can get in a situation where you can sell down 2 straight days and have 2 straight days of lower lows and weaknesses, then maybe we can start talking about pressing down to some of these other moving averages, or maybe it actually breaks those moving averages while it's doing that. But for right now, you've had no real change in market tempo other than you've gotten a few flushes. Maybe that's a sign. We're going to find out. Now let's move on to the few stocks here that I've got on my list, at least right now, through some of the stuff that I'm looking at. One of the ones here I want to try that I had some pretty good success with was Nvidia. Now, this obviously got smoked out a little bit. Let me open up the chart. I apologize for all this garbage. I usually don't have this many lines on my chart, but again, as I said, I've been doing classes all week about support and resistance, so maybe you can replay this in slow-mo for the study. But anyway, This kind of got hit here based on Intel's results and some forecasting and so on. This was a real good trade coming into Friday. Now, one of the things I'm talking about is going into major support, and I look for things like this. So you had solid selling straight into the 50 moving average on the daily chart, and pretty much this support from the 25th of March. So you had a really solid area of support and a pretty good range flush, and you got a nice little bounce. Now, it didn't bounce too much. It didn't go crazy like it did a couple of days prior to that. I think back here you had a really, really strong bounce coming off of support, but it's still showing signs of weakness. Now, the trade that I'm looking at is, I think because you've already sold off from 190 area down into the 174s, that you're probably due for at least a panic bounce, or at least a shorter, solid green day bounce. So I'm going to try to make that play earlier into the week. Now, I would like another double test of 173s, or maybe a little bit lower, to get long on that. I certainly wouldn't chase any breakouts on it because I don't quite trust this chart right now for a breakout, but I want to watch it. Now, let's say that things do change, because they always can on the snap. Is if it really stays down here and then ultimately takes out this 50 moving average, you're probably going to end up a little bit lower, down toward 165. But I think up until their earnings, providing the market stays the same, that 165 would be the worst case scenario, at least right now in this environment. Again, anything can change, but I want to look for these dips right here with Nvidia. So keep Nvidia up there early on. Another one we've got to watch now is Tesla. Now, this thing has certainly changed, and everybody's going to have their own theories. I know it's a cult stock. You either love it or you hate this thing. I'm just trying to trade it the best that I can, and you're really starting to enter a point where the whole theme of this thing has changed. And kind of my theory in all of this is, since Musk has kind of been dampened by the SEC for tweeting, he just can't randomly tweet stuff that has always been applying to his base of lovers, and that kind of hurts the stock a little bit, the ability to, say, massively pump it on maybe on a just mild scale. But anyway, earnings are out, kind of a disappointment. Much of the news coming this way is disappointment, and I think at some point when you have something like this, that even the biggest Kool-Aid fountain drinkers are going to get tired of a company missing profits and letting down expectations and so on. So what I'm here basically saying is this is a short, I think. Now that you've closed down at this level, you've got to look at it. I would never rule out that this thing wouldn't snap back and make a panic bounce. But you've seen panic bounces on this thing go for $50. Like, you had some selling here, and it looked like it was doomy for a while. Went to 348, sold back down to 278 and bounced. I mean, this is a great trading stock both ways. Whichever direction you want to look, you have a trade here. It could be set up for a nice 3 to 4 day spike, panic rally, dead bounce off of the bottom here, short covering, whatever you want to call it. It could be ready for that. But I think overall, as months go by, it will continue to trend lower as it is. So after some of these spikes, it will be a great short. For those that are day trading and are scalping and are quicker and you're looking for cash flow, then you'd want to open up your eyes too as well as some longs on this. You just got some great range in this, but I'm starting to maybe take a little bit of stance and starting to shift my biases a little bit more to the short side here, but we'll see how some of this stuff pans out. Always keep Tesla on the list. Now, another one here, I mean, I mention these same stocks almost every week because there's always a trade in them, one way or the other. But some of them are setting up a little bit better. Let's go back and look at BABA. I know I talk about this one here all the time, but King BABA, I got to find it on my list. There it is. BABA. This is kind of lining up here for a pretty good range break on the daily. You've got a double top here from March 5th over to the 11th of April. And you just kind of been clustering around this area. Now, this thing's touch and go. And I've been trying my best to pick up dips whenever I can because you get some pretty good moves out of it. But a lot of this intraday activity has been a touch on the sketchy side. You've been fortunate enough to pick up the dips, but you haven't gotten any sort of really good pressing. But I do think if you see a close or a solid move above 189.50, let's just say 190, that you got a little bit of a void to fill up here. You got just a last piece of resistance. You're going almost back to last August in some of these areas that it's trading. So this is a pretty important spot. You do have earnings coming up. So maybe you see a little earnings pop prior to. It's just one to watch. I think you can always get some good cash flow out of this trade, but at some point you may be able to just not pick up the dip and get the cash flow, but you might break this range at the same time and really get yourself a pretty solid play. So kind of watch that one up there. I'd also like to put Hasbro on this list. This has been a trade that's worked out pretty good here in the recent past, especially with earnings, and that's any of these earnings plays that can consolidate after a massive move. Now, when they come up there, you saw that kind of with Facebook, not this current quarter, but the previous quarter, or a lot of these stocks, they'll gap up. And then after such a big, huge day, they'll need a day or two to kind of settle down, rebuild. Lulu did that, for example, where it had these really massive earnings rip right here. And it sold off for 2 days. Then it came back and it really built up this strong pattern. So I'm kind of going back to Hasbro here. And you've got a few days of cluster back and forth. But I think at some point you will see, providing things stay close to the way they are, you will see a move over this 103.30. And if you get that close, or you get that strong move above that, you'll see probably a Lulu type of move. And there isn't any resistance in the daily till you start going back to last September's 109. So there's some space in there to pick up some pretty good money. Keep Hasbro up here on the list. And the last one I want to throw in is WDAY. I talked about this one as a long, and I'm typing in the wrong numbers, excuse me here. I just type in WAY. I'm just typing in tickers. WDAY. Now I'm still typing in the wrong tickers. Okay. Hold on. My apologies. Old man will get it right. There we go. All right. So I had talked about this one being a pretty good trade for a nice little range break right here. And this is when for those that are kind of new or not following along with my on-the-fly lingo, breaking range is anytime you have something like this here where it's traded within a range for a certain period of time and finally busts through that. You normally get a much larger move, and that's what's happened here, and it broke through highs. Now that it's kind of stretched, I've got to look at it the other way. It's possibly a short. Again, shorts have not been that kind in this market. They just haven't. That's all there is to it. It's just been like a dinosaur strategy. I mean, you can usually get around an area where you can figure out where to slow down or where a short-term top might be, but that's just half the battle. The next is getting a move, and any sort of pullback seems to get gobbled up in this market. So if it can stretch out a little bit, I'm thinking maybe 210s or a really big day, it has another 5+ or 6+ day, then I'll consider that. But still a little bit on guard when it comes to shorts, because they've just been so tough until I see maybe a little bit more volatility re-enter the marketplace. But I do at least want to watch it. So as we look through this, we want to look at Nvidia, we want to look at Tesla, we want to look at Hasbro, and possibly this WDAY and BABA for some trades. As always, if you guys need help, feel free to visit the live trade room. You can see how these trades play out in real time, see how we adjust accordingly. And don't forget, if that's just too much for you there, whether you just don't have the time for it or can't commit to it, that's what I mean by too much for you. Take a look at the Stock Twits live feed. It's a nice solution for people and a really great week last week of trading. So it's an opportunity for you at least to get some great quality trade ideas. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching this video. As always, take care. I'll chat with everyone next week.